This week, the government warned vulnerable groups to boil their drinking water because of a dangerous parasite that can get into water supplies across the country. But tonight, Dispatches reveals what the public's not been told about the killer in our taps.
This is Manchester's drinking water. It's collected here in the Lake District, treated and then sent nearly 100 miles to the towns and cities of the northwest. But tonight on Dispatches, we can reveal that somewhere between here and Manchester, this water becomes vulnerable to regular contamination by a dangerous pathogen, a parasite which can cause serious illness and in some cases even death. And what's more disturbing, the authorities have known about this problem for over a year and failed to tell the public. And it's not just Manchester. Our investigation has established that this parasite has affected tap water the length and breadth of Britain.
His body was just infested with it, really, you know, to an extent that even though the bone marrow in itself was working, it just wasn't able to cope with the massive load.
It took quite a long while to suddenly realise it was very difficult. In fact, there wasn't a cure. I don't think there's any excuse whatsoever that this bug should get into the water system where people can actually drink it. There is no excuse whatsoever.
Nicholas Jowett was killed by infection with Cryptosporidium oocysts, strange and dangerous spores which survive in rivers and waterways, waiting in suspended animation for their victim. Once lodged in the gut of that victim, they burst open, releasing microscopic parasites. Normally the effect is severe diarrhea and sickness, but for anyone with a suppressed immune system, the very young or old, some cancer patients, and people with HIV, for example, the result can be far more serious.
They get awful diarrhea, like you're getting cholera, up day and night, every hour. They get terrible tummy pains.
It can get into the lungs, it can get into the bile duct and cause biliary disease, gallbladder disease, pancreatic disease.
If your own immune system cannot defeat it, there is no other known cure. Cryptosporidium, or cryptospores, are found in their millions in cows and sheep. They are also known to affect people in contact with animals and can be passed from person to person. But it's only recently that another and more alarming route has been discovered by which crypto can make its way from the excrement of farm animals to us. It's this stuff, the tap water sold to you by the privatised water companies of England and Wales, or supplied to you by the water authorities of Scotland or Northern Ireland. But, as we've discovered, that's a possibility they're not always anxious to publicise. Tor Bay, Britain's Golden Coast and the perfect family resort. But for local girl Nikita Allen, Tor Bay has a less attractive side. 4 years ago, she was poisoned by its tap water.
She started losing energy. Her stomach would go hard, really hard with pain. She'd bring her knees right up and curl up into a ball, clasping onto her stomach, and she'd scream with pain.
Over the next few weeks, as Nikita's mysterious condition worsened, her mum grew more worried.
I went into her bedroom to check on her. She'd gone blue. She had vomit over her face, over her mouth and her nose, and it was still oozing out of her mouth. Her eyes were fixed and facing to one direction. She obviously wasn't conscious of anything. I couldn't get her to wake up. She was unconscious. And to be quite honest, I thought she was going to die.
Nikita was rushed to hospital and remained ill for weeks, a victim of Britain's worst crypto outbreak. In the end, South West Water, the local water company, were forced to advise 300,000 people to boil their water. Local health laboratories confirmed nearly 600 cases of cryptosporidiosis, but the real figure was far higher.
Anything between 6 and 10 times as many people were actually infected.
So we're talking about several thousand?
Oh yes, very much.
Eventually, the source of the problem was traced to this water treatment plant at Little Hempston. This was where the contaminated water was coming from. But there's something even more disturbing about the Torbay outbreak, because, unknown to most people, this was the second time it had happened. 3 years earlier, there had been another crypto outbreak. In line with government recommendations, local public health official Dr. Mark Keeley convened what is known as an outbreak control team.
An outbreak control team consists of the people that you might expect would know something about the causes of the outbreak or potentially could be involved in controlling it.
But as the finger of suspicion pointed ever more clearly at the water supply, it soon became clear that the independence of the Outbreak Committee was deeply compromised, because no less than 5 of its 13 members were from the water company.
When it came to actually accepting that water could possibly have been the cause of the outbreak, things became distinctly tricky. It eventually broke up in acrimony, really. The rest of the team decided to produce one outbreak report, and the water company went off to produce their own.
What would be your general criticism of this whole system?
I think it's a very poor system in which you have to depend on your key information and your expert advice from the person who's most likely to be indicted, basically.
In fact, by then it was arguably already too late. Because we've established that before the 92 outbreak even began, South West Water had failed to act on a series of warning signs that their water was seriously at risk from Cryptosporidium. Cryptosporidium oocysts are difficult to detect without continuous monitoring. But even without that, there are some things that the companies should look out for. The most obvious of these is the cloudiness or the turbidity of the water. If that increases, it's a clear warning that crypto could be present. And that leaves South West Water with some explaining to do. Because, according to their own internal figures, the turbidity of some of the water entering Little Hempston just before the outbreak was up to 6 times above the normal levels. Surprisingly, the spokesman put up by South West Water to discuss the 92 outbreak claimed to have limited knowledge of it.
I wasn't involved in the 1992 incident, but I have got the 1992 report as written by the Drinking Water Inspectorate. They have nothing to say other than everything is working absolutely perfectly at Little Hempston. The correct monitoring is in place.
In fact, by the time the government's watchdog, the Drinking Water Inspectorate, completed their report, they did say Torbay's water was safe. But of monitoring at the time of the outbreak, their inspector said,
"I am very critical of the company's failure to provide fully effective monitoring."
And there's something else. Although South West Water was obliged by law to tell the DWI about the 92 outbreak at the time, they did not do so. Why, after the 1992 outbreak, did you not report it to the DWI, as you were statutorily obliged to do?
I don't know.
You don't know at all?
I wasn't involved, I don't know.
Ironically, it was just a few weeks after the Drinking Water Inspector completed his report on the 92 outbreak that thousands of people, including Nikita Allen, became ill in Torbay's second crypto epidemic, the worst in Britain. Once again, the evidence pointed to Little Hempston. This time, the DWI took South West Water to court, accusing them of failing to provide water fit for human consumption. But their case, which had taken over a year to prepare, was thrown out on a technicality, to the delight of South West's lawyers.
I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to make any comments at all. Good result.
Since then, the DWI has attempted no other prosecutions for crypto. And there's a disturbing postscript. Dispatches can reveal that in July this year, unknown to the people supplied by Little Hempston, a Cryptosporidium oocyst was found once again in the treated water from the plant. Getting rid of crypto won't be cheap, but then the Big Ten water companies alone have made £14 billion profits since privatisation. So, can they be persuaded or forced to spend more of those profits on the fight against crypto? Because the possible consequences of not eradicating the problem can be devastating.
This is Wisconsin Public Radio News, and I'm Randall Davidson. Some people are questioning why health officials...
It's Monday, April the 7th, 1993, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oaks and Sinai Samaritan hospitals are rising to the occasion of this citywide health alert.
Around the city, people are falling ill.
Through grocery and drugstores in search of diarrhea medication.
At first, just a few are affected. They suffer violent abdominal pains, nausea, acute diarrhea.
There were literally hundreds of people who were sick at any given time. Clinics were full, people were calling all the time.
Good morning, Health Department.
We started getting phone calls from the media and from the public reporting widespread gastrointestinal illness in our community.
Gwen Cahill of Milwaukee is one of thousands suffering from what doctors are calling the Milwaukee bug.
Within days, Milwaukee was engulfed. An estimated 400,000 residents, a quarter of the population, fell sick. Among them, 3-year-old Becky Furman, who, although born HIV positive, was otherwise healthy.
She just got progressively worse. The pain got very severe. She would cry at night to please kiss it, make it better, Papa. We promised her we'd always keep her well, and she was looking for us to keep that promise, and we couldn't.
But for Larry and Rick Furman, the gay couple who had adopted and cared for Becky, there was something that made it worse. For the first few days of her illness, on the advice of their doctor, they had encouraged Becky to drink more and more water.
As it turned out, with the Cryptosporidium in the water and her system being weakened, every half hour I was giving our daughter a teacup full of poison.
Over the next 21 months, Becky's pain and suffering increased.
The day after Easter, she went to bed and never got up again. We told her that if she wanted us to, we would hold her hands until Jesus took her hand. And in her coma, she reached up to her Papa and Daddy and held tightly to our hips. She took 3 breaths, each one shallower, and then died.
Happy birthday to you.
Becky was just 5 when she died, 2 years of which had been blighted by cryptosporidiosis. She was one of more than 100 people who died in the Milwaukee outbreak. 100 deaths which so traumatized this town they vowed it would never happen again. Every day, this plant alone pumps some 100 million gallons of water from deep below Lake Michigan behind me. But before it goes for filtration, every drop of that is passed through these vast concrete chambers beside me for a process known as ozonation. It's the key stage in a £60 million process whose aim is the eradication of crypto. Normal chlorine treatment doesn't get rid of crypto, but ozonation does.
The ozone, of course, is used to kill crypto and any other microbe. It actually kind of tears them apart.
From the ozone generator, the water is processed in newly reconstructed filters and chemically treated. But that's not the end of the process. As the water leaves each of the filter beds, the quality is monitored 24 hours a day from a central control room.
We monitor for particles on each filter for every minute of the day. We also monitor for turbidity, which is cloudiness, on each filter every minute of every day.
Now, what kind of particles are you talking about?
These are Cryptosporidium-sized particles. Anything 2 microns and above is what we monitor.
The instant any abnormal readings are detected, an alarm sounds. and the bed is closed down. So how do British suppliers compare? The answer is not well. We've conducted a survey of all 32, and almost 60% of them admit to having found Cryptosporidium in their treated water at some point. And that's despite the fact that only one claims to monitor continuously for the parasite. Only a handful of UK water companies use ozone as they do in Milwaukee to kill crypto. Fewer than a third use special membrane filters, the only kind guaranteed to stop crypto, and even then only at a few plants. And despite healthy profit levels, at least one company seems to be cutting back on the most elementary stage of water quality control, maintenance of its water collection areas. Last year, Yorkshire Water said,
"We want to be known as the best water company in the UK."
They may have some way to go. 20 years ago, a typical Yorkshire water collection aqueduct was carefully maintained and looked like this. Today, that same catchwater looks like this. For 20 years, John Garside was a water maintenance worker in Yorkshire.
Yeah, these collection systems have just been let go. I mean, you should have lengthmen or pipe walkers or reservoir keepers to daily inspect these catchwaters and look for any pollution that might get in. And of course, with all this overgrowth, you can't see any of the pipes or drains where it's coming in.
So, I mean, even if they did do the inspections they should do,
yeah, that's right.
It's so overgrown, they probably wouldn't see any problems that did arise.
No, that's right.
And the results are clear. In a Yorkshire catchwater, we found this rotting corpse. It's difficult to imagine a more dangerous source of Cryptosporidium. Millions of cryptospores could have come from such a carcass, and it had clearly been there for some time. We removed it ourselves, a task which once would have been carried out by Yorkshire Water maintenance staff. But Yorkshire Water defends their new approach.
It was necessary in those days to patrol the catchwaters because of the poor treatment facilities that we had. We now have excellent, modern, state-of-the-art treatment facilities, and it is no longer necessary to patrol on the basis that we used to do in 1974.
In fact, Yorkshire is a Cryptosporidium black spot. No less than 15 of the 48 crypto incidents recorded by the Drinking Water Inspectorate over the past 10 years were in Yorkshire. And last year alone, crypto was found on 4 occasions in Yorkshire's treated water. But Yorkshire Water remained positive about their record.
I believe we have a reasonable record in that because we were one of the first people to be able to analyse and identify Cryptosporidium.
So the fact that Yorkshire has something like a third of all the Cryptosporidium incidents in England and Wales is a product of the fact that you monitor more than the other companies do.
I believe that's part of the reason, yes.
But for one local family, Yorkshire Water's claims sound rather hollow. Alex and Christine Jowett, seen here with their eldest son Andrew, lived near and regularly drank water from a Yorkshire Water area which has suffered 2 major crypto outbreaks. Before those outbreaks, in 1991, both Christine and her younger son Nicholas became ill with cryptosporidiosis. But because Nicholas had been born with a weakened immune system, the effect of the illness was devastating.
We certainly never got 2 nights where we went to bed and slept all night. The nature of the problem was that Nicholas was up and visiting the toilet probably every 3 or 4 hours. He also had a problem that his stomach was bloated, often before he even started eating. And it made it very uncomfortable for him. There's no question that over the time it got worse, and the symptoms were quite horrific.
Nicholas's illness was to last 5 years.
His body was just infested with it, really, you know, to an extent that even though the bone marrow in itself was working, it just wasn't able to cope.
The Cryptosporidium had invaded the organs and had created such a problem in the liver that it unfortunately killed him.
Yorkshire Water have expressed their sympathy but deny that their water caused his illness. Just 2 days ago, the government proposed new legal controls on crypto in drinking water across the country, and they issued a remarkable public warning. From now on, everyone most vulnerable should boil all their drinking water. They also said 24-hour monitoring should be introduced at some, but not all, water treatment works. You're only proposing monitoring at 1 in 4 treatment works. Why not insist that all water sources are monitored?
Our expert group, chaired by Professor Boucher, has set out a series of risk factors which determine the plants which are most at risk. That will include water taken not just from surface waters, but from groundwaters and river waters. It'll define all of the set of plants which, on historical experience, are most liable to contamination from Cryptosporidium. If the expert group, when it reconvenes in 2 years' time, believes that we should go beyond the total, which is 400 plants, then we will do so. We will do whatever is necessary on the advice of our scientists and technical specialists to prevent Cryptosporidium.
Why not do it now?
Because they are not requiring us to do that. They are not saying it is necessary. They are saying that in light of historical experience, this is all comprehensively what is necessary. We are carrying that through.
This map shows the location of all the incidents and outbreaks over the past 10 years reported to us by the government. It looks alarming enough, but Dispatches has established that the real situation is far worse, and there are many other incidents in which water is a likely source. Here, for example, over there, and worst of all, in the northwest of England. It was an outbreak which the DWI did not tell us about and did not mention in their official annual report, but an outbreak which we believe the public should be told about. Early in June last year, laboratories in 4 areas of Manchester discovered an unusual increase in crypto cases. A week later, similar increases were noticed in several Lancashire towns, all with the same water supply. But despite possible risk to health, there was no public warning. People here in Manchester and the surrounding areas were left in the dark. One of the very few local people who did hear about the problem was Dr. Ed Wilkins of North Manchester Hospital. He treats many people with HIV and was able to warn them of the dangers.
It's very important that people, for instance, like people with HIV, are warned as soon as possible. And it's a simple measure to prevent themselves getting infected by boiling water.
But our inquiries suggest that apart from Dr. Wilkins, other people serving those at risk, from carers for the elderly to cancer support groups, have never even heard of the danger, let alone been able to warn their clients.
Obviously, in my patient group, it can be a killing disease. So, yes, I am concerned that we do have these increased number of reports of Cryptosporidium. In the northwest, the figures have increased from just over 100 up to about double that in 1996. And in 1997, we have over 400 reports of Cryptosporidium.
So what's causing this problem? Most of the evidence points to the massive underground aqueduct, which begins at the Thirlmere Reservoir Treatment Works in the Lake District. Built in the last years of Victoria's reign, the aqueduct, which today lies largely unnoticed beneath the rolling hills of northern England, carries some 50 million gallons of water a day on a 100-mile journey to the northwest of England. Much of that water is consumed as it is without any further treatment to get rid of crypto. Now this should all be fine, except that as we've established, somewhere along its 100-mile route, something extraordinary happens. Because this aqueduct isn't watertight. And the problem isn't that it lets out water, it's that it lets it in, raw untreated water. And that water is open to contamination by high levels of crypto from surrounding farmland. The result, some might say, is almost inevitable. This shows the route of the Thirlmere Underground Aqueduct and the pattern of cryptosporidiosis reported in May and June last year. The majority of the cases received some or all of their drinking water via the Thirlmere aqueduct. Despite the evidence, the public were not warned, and the supplier Northwest Water claimed there was no real proof tap water was to blame. You did suspect that water might be the cause of this quite significant increase in cryptosporidiosis?
It was one of the possible causes of the outbreak. Certainly at the beginning we had no idea how the outbreak had occurred, and quite naturally as a water company we investigated whether we had a role in all of that.
Northwest Water sat on an official committee to investigate the outbreak. Their report, completed this summer, wasn't released to the public, but Dispatches has obtained a copy. And it states quite clearly that there was a significant association between the high levels of cryptosporidiosis found in Greater Manchester and the water supply. But that's a conclusion that Northwest Water still don't accept and claim there's no reason to alarm their customers. People with compromised immune systems, the very old, the very young, can die as a result of cryptosporidiosis. Shouldn't they be told?
The water company is unaware of the identities of immunocompromised individuals.
Make a public announcement.
Well, if we were to do that, I would suggest that that might result in panic, which was really not quite justified by the circumstances.
It's now just 2 days since the government finally admitted that across the country, those most vulnerable must now boil all their drinking water. The tragedy is that the technology to eradicate crypto from our tap water has existed for years, but no one is forcing the water companies to invest in it.